What's up, guys? Welcome to the line change. In this video, we're going to be discussing the latest chapter in the JT Miller Elias Pettersson saga. As for most of you that know and or saw the end of season media availability for Patrick Allvin and Jimmy Rutherford, they, at least Jimmy Rutherford anyway, opened up, discussing the whole JT Miller Petey rift and how it is he believes it's a key reason why the Canucks had such a terrible season. And he goes on to talk about, he doesn't go into complete detail on what actually happened, as he is asked that, if he's able to shed more light on, and he basically said he's not going to go into full detail, but he will say what he can say about it in regards to the rift, and he gives us some new details that some of us may not have been privy to. So we're going to go over an article on Daily Hive. Once again, I will leave a link to the article in the description down below. This article is from Noah Strang. Noah Strang of the Daily Hive, and it reads, Pettersson Miller drama got personal and affected the whole team, says Canucks president. So let's dive right into this, and then after the article, I'll do my sponsor read, and then we will dissect what is said in this article. The drama surrounding JT Miller and Elias Pettersson is a story that just won't end for the Vancouver Canucks. The feud was a major topic of discussion at Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin's year-end press conference on Monday. Rutherford addressed the issue head-on during his opening statement, admitting that the saga, which ended with Miller traded to the Rangers, caused a dramatic shift in the team's ceiling. Goes on to quote Rutherford, we had a very disappointing season that we feel bad about. We ran into an unfortunate incident in the first half of the season that hurt the chemistry of our team, and we eventually had to make a trade that we didn't expect to make and didn't want to make. So we went from a contending team to a team in transition. There were signs before the season that Pettersson and Miller didn't get along, but the issue reached a fever pitch this year. Rutherford admitted that it became a dark cloud over the entire team. This goes on to quote Rutherford once again. There was lots to it. I think a lot of things were personal. I don't believe that it was just down to two people. It filtered into the whole team or most of the team, and it affected the chemistry of our team. Part of what caused the tension between the two players to soar this year seems to be Pettersson's fitness at the start of the year. Allvin, Rutherford, and head coach Rick Tocchet have criticized Pettersson's training last summer as he showed up in subpar shape. This is a quote from Rutherford once again. Everybody's aware that because of injuries or whatever reasons, Petey wasn't prepared properly for the start of training camp and the start of the season, continued Rutherford. I think that became one of the issues here that started to get things firing up. Miller took a 10-game leave of absence starting in November. Rutherford confirmed today that Miller requested the leave, and it was not imposed by the team. When he returned, the issue did not resolve itself, forcing the team to make more drastic action by choosing between one of the players. This was a situation that wasn't as easy to resolve in a matter of a day or a week, but when we got to the point that everybody in the organization felt that it wasn't going to be resolved, we had to look at what all the options were, said Rutherford. While the Canucks eventually dealt Miller to the Rangers to resolve the problem, that wasn't a foregone conclusion. It's been widely reported that the Canucks nearly traded Pettersson instead, and were in deep negotiations with the Carolina Hurricanes. JT was getting anxious, and he wanted to make it clear that he did want to be traded, but all options were on the table. I have the utmost respect for JT as a person, as a player. I wish him well, explained Rutherford. The article does go on to continue. I do think that in a lot of ways, JT tried to help fix the situation. A lot of people in our organization worked on it. We'd hoped it could get back to where it was a year ago. Now that the dust has settled, the Canucks are left with Pettersson as their top-line center. He had just 45 points this past year, far below the level expected of a player making $11.6 million per season. Management has criticized his training, and this summer, there's a renewed focus on the 26-year-old's workout plan. Pettersson has agreed to stay in Vancouver for some extra training at the start of this offseason. Both Rutherford and Uppbeat praised the Swedish star for visiting the facility over the most recent weekend and putting in extra work. He's a guy that's always going to be able to get his points, but can you be a contending team with your top player just getting points? I can answer that question. The answer is no, you can't, said Rutherford. Pettersson has a no-trade clause which kicks in on July 1st. Today, Allvin wouldn't guarantee Pettersson won't be traded, instead saying he wants to keep all options open, but did give a message of support for the struggling center. Now, we did a video earlier today about that. You can find that right here if you're interested in that article. We still believe Elias is more than capable of coming back to form, Allvin said. It's encouraging to see his determination, work ethic over the past few days. The effects of the Miller-Pettersson drama will be felt by the Canucks for years. The feud sent this team into a tailspin, but with the long summer ahead before the start of next season, some time off may actually be what the Canucks need to regroup and refocus. So that's the article on that, which is interesting, from Noah Strang of the Daily Hive. Some great work there. But yeah, before we discuss the whole Miller Petey stuff, let me do my sponsor read, and then we'll dive right into that. Are you looking for an energy drink that is jitter-free, crash-free, no sugars, no artificial colors or dyes, and no calories? Then Dubby Energy is for you. With over 15 plus unique custom-made flavors, go ahead and get a starter sampler pack, which includes 3 different flavors. Use code TheLineChange to get 10% off your next purchase. Dubby Energy, your taste buds' favorite energy drink. All right, let's break down this article and discuss it. I'm going to bring it up onto the screen for myself. So they talked about how, and I wanted to particularly point this out, that Miller's 10 game leave of absence, some people said that they felt as though the team may have imposed it on JT Miller due to an incident that occurred after he was benched in Nashville. But Rutherford confirmed in the end of season presser that Miller himself requested the leave. And Rutherford also mentioned that Miller himself attempted to fix the situation himself. Now, I'm not sure if that includes him taking the 10 game leave of absence, like removing himself from the situation for a little bit and then seeing if it can, fizzle out. He didn't go into great detail on what exactly JT attempted to do to fix the situation, but it is nice hearing that JT himself attempted to fix the situation. He wasn't trying to fuel the fire, which kind of, in my opinion, makes Petey kind of look like the bad guy. Like, he wasn't trying to meet JT in the middle when it came to fixing this situation. He was being, now I'm not saying this is fact. I'm just, assuming that Petey was being stubborn, and, Miller had said something to him and he was kind of, in a way, being a little butthurt over it and was being a little bit of a child and wasn't getting over it. But that, again, that is just my take, my opinion. But it seems like this whole thing, at least this year anyway, I know this thing has been an issue for a few years now, that they haven't been, and both men have said they're not the greatest of friends, but they respect each other as teammates. Petey himself mentioned that. And this all stems to Pettersson's training last summer and not showing up to training camp in shape. And perhaps that may have rubbed JT Miller, who is a very, very competitive guy. Perhaps that may have rubbed him the wrong way. I mean, here you have Elias Pettersson having just signed an $11.6 million contract in March. And then fast forward to September, and you have Pettersson, having signed that, having gotten that big payday, showing up to training camp not in shape, having not trained properly, in parts due to his tendonitis injury and having to work around the injury. Miller is probably looking at this like, this guy just got paid $11.6 million. He's making more money than I am. And he's showing up to training camp looking like this. That probably pissed off JT Miller. And he went about, and I will admit, he probably went about it the wrong way. He should have just gone to the team, not, perhaps gone after Petey himself. No. Obviously, when it comes to the trade, clearly the Canucks didn't want to trade Miller. They, Rutherford himself said it himself. Essentially, they didn't want to make the trade. They didn't want to trade JT, but their hand was forced. They were forced to do it. And it led to, and Rutherford even said in the presser that they approached JT, to see if he'd be open to being traded to another team. And JT said he was. And then a few weeks went by, or give or take, excuse me. And then Miller went to the Canucks, and he was getting anxious, and he made it abundantly clear to the team that he wanted to be traded to the Rangers. And that was around the time that we had heard rumblings about Miller possibly going to New York. Miller had that Last Supper-like dinner with the team, and then he ended up not being traded. And then a couple weeks later, the trade goes through with the Rangers. And yeah, but just hearing that, I mentioned in that previous video, when it comes to the tampering that Rutherford did in regards to Quinn Hughes and his brothers, which you can find right here as well. We brought up the example of there possibly being tampering when it came to that trade, because Chris Drury went to Vinny Trocheck, who is, as I mentioned in that video, very close friends with JT, and asked him, do you think JT would want to come here? And then Trocheck himself went to JT and asked him himself. We're not going to get into the tampering part, but around that time, we also mentioned in that exact same video that Vinny Trocheck's wife had surprised JT's wife, Natalie, coming out to Vancouver for, I believe it was a birthday or something like that. She had surprised her. And that was around the time when, this ball started rolling, when the team asked JT about if he'd be willing to go to another team. As Natalie had mentioned, that both players were on the road. And they mentioned, obviously Trocheck's wife had probably brought it up to Natalie, and then Natalie probably brought it to JT, and then they, discussed it together as a family. And then, Rutherford ends up saying, after the almost trade that happened, 2 weeks prior to the actual trade, 2 weeks later, and then Rutherford ends up saying JT was getting anxious. So perhaps he had, discussed it with his wife and was like, this is probably something we should do. Who knows? Maybe she talked him into it. I can't speak for them. But it's interesting to hear Rutherford say, after a couple weeks, JT was getting anxious. And he wanted to make it very clear that he did want to be traded. But I just think that's a very key and interesting part of what Rutherford said in regards to it. The fact that JT got anxious and basically wanted out, because a lot of people were saying JT was, wanted out, well prior to this. But clearly this says, after a little bit, he perhaps got impatient and just wanted it dealt with, wanted it over and done with. And that's why he went to the team and made it clear to them that he wanted to be traded to the Rangers, which is why I bring up the whole tampering thing. But we're not going to dive too much into the tampering itself. But as I mentioned earlier, I do think it's interesting that JT tried hard to help fix the situation. Now, we, of course, don't know exactly how he tried to help it. I mentioned that perhaps that 10-game absence was a way of him trying to help fix it. Rutherford mentions a lot of people in the organization worked on it. They had hoped to get it back to where it was a year prior. As everybody remembers, last year, that whole JT Petey thing, while we had known about it from prior year or previous years, it never came up at all because both JT and Petey were playing extremely well. But yeah, so that's my take on it. I did find it interesting that JT himself tried to help fix the situation. He didn't try and make it worse. And as I mentioned as well, it kind of paints Petey in a bit of a bad light when it comes to maturity. It seems like between the two, JT was being a bit more mature, as I have seen online a lot of flack for JT and him essentially being painted as the villain in this whole scenario, in particular by the people, the EP40 supporters, or some people like to say the PD police. But it seems like JT did try and fix this from within, and Pettersson just wasn't willing to play ball and help out himself. We don't know that for sure, but it's sounding like that from what Rutherford is saying. So let me know what you guys think about this new development or new details in the whole JT Miller, Elias Pettersson saga, or this additional chapter, perhaps an epilogue to the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson saga. Once again, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think on JT attempting to fix it himself, and hearing that he himself asked for the 10-game leave of absence. The team did not enforce it on him. There have been rumblings about particular incidents happening behind the scenes, and in particular after that game when he was benched in Nashville, that some incidents actually happened in front of people. We may never know what those actually were. Perhaps we'll know, years from now, we'll actually get full-on details. We don't know. But at the end of the day, the trade happened, and the Canucks ended up choosing Elias Pettersson over JT Miller. JT Miller wanted to be traded to the New York Rangers, and he got his wish. And it just absolutely sucks because I've mentioned on this channel that I was a big JT Miller fan. I even have a JT Miller jersey back there. And yeah, I haven't really discussed this on this channel in particular, but I've mentioned it to a few people. Honestly, I actually felt a bit of a personal connection with JT, and I got a little JT story for you guys. And this is just my own personal story. Let me just start off by saying I didn't actually get a chance to meet JT personally myself, one-on-one, and talk to him, but I did work at a restaurant in West Van where JT lived. At Park Rail. Some of you may know it, Tap House, the Village Tap House. I worked there for a number of years, and he was a regular at Village Tap House. And he would come in, and he would order the same thing every single time. And the thing that he ordered was the Nashville hot chicken sandwich. And I always knew when it was JT, because he would always get it no pickles. He would always get it no pickles. So a handful of times I made JT Miller his Nashville hot chicken sandwich. I thought that was really cool, and that made it a little personal for me, especially when he got traded. I do remember one day when he did come in, I believe it was one of the servers, I forget who, mentioned that JT was here. I happened to peek my head around the corner as there was a little door that went out into the restaurant. I peeked my head around the corner, and I spotted him at the bar wearing a baseball hat, being a little incognito, but I knew it was him. I recognized him. So there's my little JT Miller story for those that have not heard that. And that's another reason why, this trade really, stung me personally, as, even though I no longer work at Tap House and am making him food anymore. Actually, believe it or not, my wife actually was like, they should rename that sandwich the JT Miller Special. And that was full credit to her. That was her idea. I'm not taking the credit for that, but I do kind of feel like they kind of missed the ball on that. They could have had something there, but I digress. Once again, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this latest chapter in the JT Petey saga. I went on a bit of a tangent there with that little story, but I wanted you guys to hear that story in regards to JT Miller. Once again, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you're not subscribed to The Line Change and would like to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. You can find us on social media, as you can see above. You can find us on Twitter /X @LineChangeVan. You can find us on Instagram @TheLineChange. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search The Line Change to find our Facebook page. If you prefer a audio version of this podcast, you can find us on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. And that's going to do it for this video. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video.